And thanks again for joining us. We're going to get started right away. We have an excellent show for you, prepared for you today, and actually the star of the show, so to speak, is Max Beaumont from Lilly Pulitzer. So Max has worked for Lilly Pulitzer for over 8 years and has been in his current role as Business Intelligence Supervisor for 3 years. Over the past year and a half, he's been instrumental in leading a culture change around data at Lilly, utilizing Looker built atop of Snowflake to empower users to find their own insights rather than relying on canned reports. Elena Riel is also joining us from Looker. She's a senior product marketing manager there. In her 5 years at Looker, she's held a number of different roles within marketing, giving her a unique perspective on how teams can use the tool to analyze everything from events to operations to webinars. Her background is in business management and economics and studied those at Fordham University. And my name is Ross Perez. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Snowflake, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the star of today's show, Max. And Max, thank you so much for joining us here today.
No problem, Ross.
Great.
I think it's actually Elena's turn to do this part.
Of course.
Excuse me.
Thank you so much for that for the introduction, Ross. Before Max takes the stage, so to speak, I just wanted to kind of walk everybody through kind of what we see the flow of marketing analytics and marketing insights being with Snowflake and Looker. So our view is that you should take all of your marketing data, regardless of where it's coming from, and centralize it into a powerful database like Snowflake. Once you have everything together and in the same place, it offers you the ability to start to combine that data and get insights that are not just based on one source, but are based on multiple. And this allows marketers to do rich analysis and do things like multi-touch attribution, really, really complex funnel analysis, and then even to become more proactive with their analytics and really start to find new opportunities in their data and new business opportunities. From there, you have a powerful tool like Looker to use for things like alerting and scheduling to start to get more proactive with that data, and then to start to push that into other programs. So now what you have is you have your data coming from something like Snowflake, and you're using it in a Slack channel and bringing it into all these different conversations to really create a more rich experience around analytics. So with that background, I'm going to pass it over to Max to tell you a little bit about how they're doing this at Lilly Pulitzer.
Sure. Thank you, Elena. So as Ross, my name is Max Beaumont. I am the Business Intelligence Supervisor at Lilly Pulitzer. I've been in my role for about 3 years now. And Snowflake and Looker asked me to come talk to you today because over the past year and a half, we have been essentially revamping our entire data and reporting environment. And today I'm going to focus mostly on the marketing aspect of that, as you're aware. But I also want to talk about, why did we get into that project in the first place? Because you're not going to make changes like revamping your entire data or reporting environment in a vacuum for marketing purposes. You need to have a general idea of what's going on. So hopefully by giving you the context of what we went through at Lilly Pulitzer, you can see parallels between your own company and us. Maybe you can see some similarities, and maybe you can decide to go through the same project. First, a little bit about Lilly Pulitzer. Lilly is a high-end women's apparel company primarily operating through 60 U.S.-based retail locations, e-commerce, and wholesale B2B. You'll see a lot of pink on this slide. That's not a coincidence. We like our pink. We like our greens. We like to stand out. If you are walking down the street and you see a woman wearing a printed shift dress that is pink and green and blue and orange and has like parrots and boats on it, it's probably one of ours. We have about 300 employees in the corporate offices, about 1,000 employees total, so about a mid-sized company. Lilly grew from being primarily wholesale to now primarily being DTC or direct-to-consumer focused. Thus, we have many different systems sending data to different databases. Our data is incredibly stratified, and this was the main problem that we were trying to solve by going through this process. And I'll get into this in a couple of slides, but you'll see how this is the main problem and how it caused us to go through this entire project. And finally, the nature of technology adoption in the BI and reporting space has primarily been point solutions, third-party bolt-on BIware, and homegrown reporting. We were always told in BI, this next solution, make it fast, make it quick. Don't worry about whether or not we're going to be using it 2, 3, 5 years down the road. So not only do we have a technical issue in terms of disparate data across the different databases, we actually also had a cultural issue that we had to overcome, where for so long we were relying on the quick the easy solution instead of picking one unified database, one unified reporting tool that will be able to handle all of our solutions. So with that, let's get into the overall goals as a marketing team. And these were the things that I identified with the marketing department going into the project. The overall goals. So first, I mean, this is the golden goose that every marketer wants, right? The holistic view of our customer. And this has become so much harder over time because you have so many more touch points for customers. They can walk into a retail store and buy. They can walk into a retail store and not buy. They can go into a website and purchase. They can go into the website and not purchase. Maybe they're talking about you on Facebook or Twitter. How do you get all of that information in one place? Well, it's really difficult. We knew we had to pick a solution, both the database and the reporting tool that would be able to handle all those separate touch points. So I'll be getting into that a little bit later. Number two, make it easier for non-technical people to answer their questions. Now, as you can guess, if you have data separated out between all your databases, getting to that data, especially to create a single view of a customer, is really, really difficult. Because if you have all your retail transactional data living here and all of your e-commerce transactions living here, well, if Mary Sue walks into a store and buys something, then she purchases something online, we now have two customer records for her, even though it is actually the same person. So if a marketer is trying to build a campaign that is looking at a single view of the customer, they have to pull all these data from different places and maybe join it together with VLOOKUPs in Excel and use formulas, and now they've made a mistake in the formula, and now their data is wrong. We didn't want to have our marketing analysts do that anymore because it's actually not what we hired them for. We hired them for their analysis skills, not their ability to pull that data. We wanted to do all of that grunt work behind the scenes within Snowflake, within Looker, hand it off to the marketing analysts and let them do the analysis. So that was a big goal of ours. Number three, develop the personalized experiences and targeted offers for customers. And this goes back to the number one, to create a holistic view of the customer. Again, you have so many touch points from a customer. Where are they entering the brand from? It can be from a million different places. But you need to have all of those touch points talking to each other. So the targeted offer, for instance, if you have a customer go in and buy something on a retail store, or in a retail store, if they buy a dress, and you know that this handbag goes really well with that dress, you need to target that customer online if you see them. You need to be able to link that retail transaction to that cookie on the web tag. For a long time, we weren't able to do that. The other big piece of this, the personalized experiences. Lilly is unique in that we are a multi-generational brand. For so many apparel companies, generally, if you're marketing towards teenagers, you don't want the teenagers' moms wearing that clothing because it's not cool anymore. The teenagers will never buy that. Lilly is actually different. It's generational. The grandmother will pass down the clothing to the mother. The mother will pass down the clothing to the daughter. And so you need to know all that information about a customer. You need to know if a customer walks into a store, the associates need to know that this is Mary Sue. She lives here. Her daughter's birthday is coming up, and last year she bought something for her daughter that she really loved. Maybe it was a dress. Maybe you have a similar dress in a new delivery. Really getting those personalized experiences. The customer needs to feel like family when they walk into a store. One of the big problems was we weren't giving the stores any of that customer information. And so how can you expect them to make a customer feel like family when they don't know anything about that customer? So that was obviously a big goal of ours. The next two, actually more focused on the IT side, but we'll talk about the first one, reduce costs devoted to analytics. And when I talk about cost, I mean, this can mean multiple things. Of course, cost, money, the big thing, but cost can also mean time, the opportunity cost of spending time pulling the data instead of analyzing it. As you can imagine, when you have data spread out across all of your different databases, you are now spending time pulling it all together in a single Excel report using VLOOKUPs. And now you have a cost devoted to pulling the data instead of doing the analysis. And maybe you are making bad decisions because you don't have time to do that analysis. And maybe now you are losing money. So now we're back to money as a function of time. In addition, for the IT team, you will see in a couple of slides, we were maintaining 8 different reporting tools. And why do you need 8 different reporting tools? Well, you don't. You need 1. But because you have all those reporting tools, because you have all those disparate databases, Now you are paying licensing fees for each one. You are paying server maintenance for each one. You are paying consulting fees for each one. We knew we wanted to reduce the cost by getting down to one single unified environment. And then that last one, very similar, reduce the burden of technical infrastructure. And this is more on the IT side. If you have all your different databases, all of your different reporting systems, you need to be able to support them. Even if it's a reporting tool that one person uses for one purpose, you have to support it if you don't have a replacement. So again, another big reason for us to get all into one single unified reporting environment built on a single unified database. Okay, so those were our overall goals. Let's talk a little bit about the specific marketing use cases. What were some things that the marketing team knew they wanted to do after this project was completed? Well, first one, I've talked about this, giving stores greater access to customer data. And for like 3 or 4 years, they essentially had none of this. They were able to go into their point of sale and look up a transaction, look up a customer record, but this didn't have anything related to e-commerce. Didn't have anything related to householding. Didn't have anything related to their family members. And we talked about the personalized experience. The store wasn't able to do any of that because they didn't know anything about the customer. So now we are able to push that data out to the stores. We're able to combine retail and e-commerce data in a single place. Because I know personally from experience, if I buy something at a brand online, when I walk into the store, I expect them to know about it, to be able to look it up, make sure I can return it, for instance. For a long time, we weren't able to do that. We were not able to link a customer's e-commerce and retail transactions. So now that is something that we were able to do. Number 2, integrating in-store Wi-Fi vendor to identify customers walking into stores without purchasing. And I mentioned this as a touch point. So we have traffic counters in our stores. So a customer walks in, we count that person. We don't know anything about them. So I can say, for instance, at this store on this day, I saw 100 people walk in. I saw 20 total transactions. So we had a 20% conversion rate, which is fine. But what about those 80 people who walked in and didn't buy? Why didn't they buy? Well, but first, before we worry about the why, who are they? So something that we wanted to tackle in this project was using our in-store Wi-Fi vendor. So if a customer logs into Wi-Fi, we now have their email address, we now have their MAC address. And anytime they walk by the store with that device or walk in without buying, we know when they walked in, we knew where they walked in, and we know who they are. And maybe we can reach out to them if we have their information. Email them like, did you have a good experience at the store? Essentially trying to figure out, why didn't you buy when you were there? The main goal of us is to get people to walk into the store, but if they're walking in and not buying, we have to know that as well. Number 3, pulling one customer list instead of 60, one for each store. And I felt really bad for the marketing associate we hired about 1.5 years ago because I was explaining to her how she has to pull this information out of our third-party CDP, our customer data platform. And it's done individually for each store. She has to enter her filters, set her date ranges, put her segmentation in, choose the product she wants, etc., and pull that customer list. And it may take 10 minutes to process, and then she has to download it into Excel and shoot it off to the store. And then she has to do that 59 more times. Again, we go back to cost as a measurement of time. This is something that would take her all day for a single campaign. We knew we wanted to change that so that she could get back to essentially what she was hired for, doing actual marketing analysis. And Looker in particular really helped us with this, so I'll be getting into that later. Number 4, identifying and engaging top customers in personal ways. I've talked about the personalized experience at Lilly. It's really, really important. The customer needs to feel like family when they walk in. So something that we like to do is we actually send out handwritten thank you notes to customers after they make big purchases. So a customer walks in, they buy a scarf and 2 dresses, maybe spend $500. The store will write that customer a handwritten thank you note saying, thank you, Mary Sue, for walking in and buying this dress and this scarf. Love to hear about your daughter's graduation. I hope everything's good at home. Again, for that personalized experience. Because the stores didn't have any data, it was really difficult for them to do that. Again, it was possible because they had to look up the transaction in the point of sale and then look up the customer record and then look up what was on the sale, etc. We knew we wanted to make that easier, and so in Looker we were able to. Number 5, integrating the online web tag to create an attribution model. I think this is another a golden goose for a lot of marketers, right? Getting that attribution model correctly built. And this is something that's actually still in the road for us. But something that I'm going to be talking about is when you're going through scoping out this project, you need to dream big. Dream about everything you want to be able to do, no matter how long it's going to take you. And then make sure you choose the technology solutions that are able to handle all of those possibilities. In this case, the online web tag, it's going to be a huge, huge data set because this is now going to be capturing every single customer event on the website. Every time they click on a different page, every time they view an image, every time they bounce, every time they abandon a cart, we have to know all of that information. It's going to be a large data set. Can your server, can your old BI tool handle it? We knew ours couldn't. I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But we knew we had to go to a more modern technology stack to be able to integrate our web tag in to build that overall customer profile. And last, the general focus is creating a 360-degree model of the customer. And again, this is the pipe dream of every marketer out there, right? How do you get every single touch point for a customer into one place? It is still in progress for Lilly Pulitzer, but now we have the technology solutions in-house to be able to do it with Snowflake and Looker. Okay, so those were the general marketing goals and use cases. But now let's go back into what was the overall problem with Lilly Pulitzer's data and reporting environment. And I love this slide. I had a lot of fun making it. Generally, when you have a lot of arrows like this, especially if they're pointing both forwards and backwards, that's not good. Nobody sits down and designs a reporting environment like this. But how did it happen? Well, first let's talk about what we're looking at here. Along the top, we have our source systems. This is where the data is going to be coming in from. We have our signature stores, our wholesale, our retail point of sale, our website. I'm not going to be focusing too much on wholesale during this presentation. We'll focus on the other three. Below that, we have our databases. Where is the data going to? That's the dark blue. So we have our IBM DB2. We have our Microsoft SQL Server. We have two instances of Oracle, one for e-commerce order management, one for warehouse management. And this is, again, a big problem, is what I talked about with the disparate data silos. You have your retail living here. You have your e-commerce living there. Even though it might be the same customer, purchasing in different channels, they don't live in the same place. We knew we had to address that. Now, what you'll see is that we are not actually tackling this specific problem in the sense that we are not going to be moving our application servers around. The goal is instead to fix the problem at the bottom, those reporting tools. And if you count those up, I mentioned we have 8 of them. That is 7 more reporting tools than you actually want. And now how does this happen? Well, I also mentioned not only do we have the disparate data systems, but we also have the overall company culture of doing these bolt-on, quick, easy, cheap solutions. Maybe for single problems. I know, for example, on the bottom left, we use Pentaho for one single report. It just so happened that Pentaho did it better than a lot of others. But now you are supporting an entire reporting system for one report. And now you're also having problems with data definitions, with inconsistent data. Even though 2 people might be ostensibly reporting on the same thing, like what was traffic yesterday, if it's coming out of 2 different systems, like if it's coming out of Google Analytics versus something else, you might get 2 entirely different numbers. And that will just happen because if you're going against different source databases, you are going to come up with different numbers. So our goal was to get rid of those 8 reporting systems. We only want to have 1. And selfishly, it was because I didn't feel like getting that email, which was, why does this report not match that report? Oh, I'm supposed to get that one. So we knew we wanted to move away from that as a model. Now, let's talk a little bit, okay, what was the impact of that disparate data at Lilly Pulitzer? I've touched on a couple of these, so let's go into a little bit more of detail. So the first one, the high team cost to maintain systems. I've spoken about this. Cost being both time and money. If you are having your marketing analysts spending all their time pulling their data from your different systems, they are not doing actual analysis, and they are making bad decisions. In addition, there is the money cost to the IT team because you are supporting those 8 different reporting systems, your server maintenance, your consulting fees, your licensing fees, etc. So we knew we wanted to get rid of that. Number 2, the poor decisions made on incomplete data due to silos. And I'll give a specific example here. So about a year and a half ago, Lilly Pulitzer instituted a new initiative, which was granting free returns to customers for e-commerce orders. So for a long time, Lilly Pulitzer would charge $7 to return something online. And there was a growing movement within the company to change that because the behavior of the e-commerce customers changed so greatly. And personally, I blame Amazon for this. Just everybody expects fast shipping. Everyone expects free returns. And especially with an apparel company, because apparel sizing can be so specific to the company, what a lot of people will do, especially new customers who never purchased with the brand before, they look at a dress, they like the dress. Usually they're small, but they don't know how Lilly sizes. So they're going to buy a small and a medium, and they're going to return whichever one doesn't fit. Very much expected behavior at this point. So the hypothesis was that we were not attracting new customers because we were not offering free returns. The new customers wouldn't know how we size. And because we are charging them to do a return, they're just not going to purchase from us at all. So thought was, okay, put this in place. We expect to see more new customers using this feature, buying 2 items, returning 1. And so the e-commerce team, they came to me and asked me to look at that. And I did. And I understand logically why they came up with that hypothesis, because it makes sense, right? But when I actually looked at the data, I found out that it was returning customers who were doing that behavior more often than new customers, which is not obvious at all. I let the e-commerce team handle the why part of that. But the point here is that there are poor decisions that can be made on incomplete data because the e-commerce team, they didn't have access to pull that information because it's all living in these different systems. Where does the customer data live? As a SQL analyst, I was able to get into that and do some advanced analysis. But without the ability to pull that information, you will be making assumptions based on logic. So if I had not pulled that information for them, they would have been thinking that new customers are the people who are returning, when actually it's the opposite. So that's a big one. You cannot make decisions based on assumptions. But because of the way we had our data structured at Lilly Pulitzer, the teams were forced to. They had no other choice. Okay, number 3, difficulty scaling to meet the analytics needs of the business. And scaling here, again, can mean multiple things. In this case, I'm going to talk about storage as opposed to compute, the scaling of storage. And I've talked about this with the web tag, the massive data set. We knew this was going to take up gigs and gigs, and probably terabytes of data in our system. And we knew that we used Microsoft SQL Server with Microsoft SSAS analysis services as one of our main reporting systems. We knew that SQL Server wasn't going to be able to handle that because, frankly, we didn't have enough free disk space. So as the needs of the company changes, for example, integrating a web tag, we couldn't scale to meet those needs because our systems were too old. The final one, slow queries and dashboards, it's essentially the same thing, the lack of scaling, this time with compute. When we initially scoped out our reporting server, it was 5 years ago. And we built it based on the needs of 5 years ago. Well, it is now 2018. It is no longer 2013. And our needs have changed. And Lilly Pulitzer has changed as a company. We are doing much more business now. And now all of our reports run a little bit slower. All of our processing time runs a little bit slower. All of our queries run a little bit slower. And we are not able to scale to those changes as the business changes. So those were the big impacts of the disparate data at Lilly. Okay, so here is the solution, as you can probably guess. I like this slide a lot better because you can see fewer arrows, all going in the same direction, generally a better idea. And what you can see on the left side, we didn't do anything with the source databases. So we still have our IBM DB2, our Oracle with our e-commerce data, all in the same place. We knew we weren't going to change that. But what we had to have was all of that data feeding into one single unified database, which, as you can probably guess, it's Snowflake at the middle, and then one reporting tool. So we don't have those 8 reporting systems anymore. We have one, and that's on the right side, Looker. And the way we do that, we have an ETL process. So ETL stands for extract, transform, load, and it's essentially how do you get data from point A to point B. We use a vendor called Matillion. They live in AWS. They're great. I'd really, love for you to go check them out. They've done a ton of stuff for us. In addition, we also use Python scripts to be able to load data directly from an Amazon S3 bucket into Snowflake. And now everything lives in a single place. And now we have a one reporting tool on top of that unified database. And what does this mean? Well, we have our internal dashboards. We have our CSV exports. We have our customer 360 analysis. This is all easier because A, it's generated behind the scenes in Snowflake automatically, and it's all going to agree with each other. Now I don't get those emails of why doesn't this report match that report anymore, because we have one single source of the truth and one reporting system to report on that source of the truth. At the bottom, the Snowflake and Looker value. So with Snowflake, as you can guess, unified data is the number one. I think I've adequately covered how important that is. Number two, also important, simplified data transformation. One of my biggest problems is that I'm constantly switching between these different databases. So, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, DB2, they all use different syntaxes. And it was just, frankly, it was annoying for me to constantly have to change up my syntax. Now in Snowflake, I only have one syntax to worry about. Then finally, existing tools integrate seamlessly. I think you'll find this on your own when you investigate. Almost every tool out there, every ETL tool, every reporting tool is going to have a pre-built integration with Snowflake because they're one of the big players now. That was never a concern for us. Were we going to be able to integrate our Snowflake with the tool that we want? It was never a problem. Everybody integrates with Snowflake. On the right, the value of Looker, the universal access to key metrics, and in particular, the unified key metrics. What do I mean by that? KPIs were defined inconsistently at Lilly Pulitzer. Again, because we had so many different reporting systems. So the example I love to give is we were trying to build a report that had BTC on it. There's retail and e-commerce in the same place with combined numbers. And you would be shocked at how difficult that is because every number we had was defined differently. For example, average order value, which is key to any retailer, was defined differently between retail and e-commerce. Retail included returns, e-commerce did not. And so we couldn't combine those numbers in any logical way because they're just defined differently. Now within Looker, because we have one reporting tool where all the channels live, average order value can be defined the same across all of our channels. Number two, rich and drillable dashboards. Looker is a beautiful tool. I think you'll find that when you do a demo. And one of the great things is the drill capabilities. So we have a retail store dashboard, for instance. This is where the stores go and they look at their overall selling. And one of the looks on the dashboard, look is just a single report, is a pie chart showing, for example, product class selling. So a store can go in and see, oh, wow, like my sweaters are doing really well this week. Why is that? They can click on the pie chart and get deeper. So they click on the sweaters, and now they can go into their specific styles that are doing really well, the specific colors within those sweaters. In Excel, it's really difficult to do that. You have to work with a pivot table, which is no fun. But with that said, at the bottom, you can easily download, email, and share the data. Some people at Lilly are just never going to give up Excel, unfortunately, no matter how much I try. So what is nice about Looker is that if you have those holdouts, you can very easily download your data sets into Excel and do your analysis there if you want to. In addition, you can set your own email schedule. So for a long time as the BI supervisor, I was in control of our reporting systems, and I was setting the schedules for every single report to every single person. Meaning if someone wants a report to come out at 8 a.m. instead of 9 a.m., they emailed me and I changed it. I didn't want to spend time on that anymore. So now within Looker, people can control their own schedules, which is really, really big for us. Next, here is a quote from my boss after we went through this project. So pre-Snowflake, we were struggling with data silos. But with our new unified database and real-time company-wide reporting capabilities, we are turning our data into a crucial business asset. And that word asset is really important because for a long time at Lilly, data was a liability. It was an obstacle to getting to what you needed. It was something you had to wrestle with. You had to go into your email and open up 3 different Excel reports and stitch them all together in one Excel report and use your VLOOKUPs and use your formulas, and you make a mistake and now your data is wrong. Data was an obstacle. It kept you from getting to where you wanted to be. Now data is an asset because everything lives in one place, whether it be Snowflake or Looker. The reports can be generated consistently and accurately. So we went from having data as a liability to now it is an asset. So I think I made it pretty clear why Lilly Pulitzer felt the need to go through this project. But I guess the next question is, well, why did we go with Snowflake? And I'll talk about four main reasons why. So first, easy management. Second, all of our data is now in one place. Three, we pay only for the analytics we need. And four, it services all of our users. Let's go into this first one, easy management. This is something that I've been trying to drill into the IT department over the past couple of months. And that is this fact. Lilly Pulitzer is an apparel company. We are not a tech company. If we do not have to be managing these 10 things on this slide, we do not want to be. Because spending time doing query tuning or worrying about storage or doing manual backups, it's not helping us sell clothes. That is the purpose of the company. We sell clothing. We do not do server management if we don't have to. For a long time, we were doing it because we had all these databases on-prem. But now we are letting our third-party vendor, Snowflake, handle all of it. So the two big ones here that I love, the storage worries. I've talked about this with the web tag. When you start to pipe in your web tag, you will be shocked at how much data you get. It'll be terabytes and terabytes. We were not going to be able to handle that with our old servers. But now with Snowflake, if you turn that pipe on and get tons of terabytes of data in, there's no problem. Snowflake will just automatically partition that to your instance. Nothing's going to crash. You might pay a little bit more. Frankly, the storage costs are a pittance within Snowflake. And you just don't have to worry about that anymore. We've had servers crash here because of low disk space. And it's just not in Lilly's best interest to be spending time worrying about disk space. The other big one that I love is the no manual backups. I used to do backups at Lilly before I went into my current role, like literal tape backups. And that feeling when someone accidentally drops a table or a server crashes, and you have to make that long walk off to the the storage locker for your physical tapes, and the entire time you're thinking, man, oh man, I hope I configured that job correctly, that backup job. That was no fun. Now Snowflake handles that all for us. So if I accidentally drop a table, I can just type in undrop table, and it'll pop right back up. Snowflake calls it time machine. By default, we're going to be able to see anything over the past day. So we don't have to worry about those backups anymore, which is huge for us. Next one, all of our data in one place. And I think I made this one pretty clear. Now we have all of the source systems in a single database with a single reporting engine built on top of it. And what I want to focus on here is in that middle, the structured data as well as semi-structured data. I've talked about dreaming big as a marketer. Think about all of your use cases and make sure you choose the technology stack that can handle everything. Well, we had talked about web tag and how a web tag, that data is very likely going to come in via JSON or XML, which are semi-structured data. With our old server, we were not able to handle semi-structured. With Snowflake, we are. So even though our web tag is still in progress, we know we have chosen a tool that is able to handle that going forward. Next up, the pay-as-you-go model, so pay for the analytics you use. And we love this one because anytime you're going into a new project, obviously the cost matters a lot. If your new vendor can do everything you've ever wanted, but it costs $1 billion a year, you're probably not going to be using it. And so the example I'll give here is, again, we'll go back to that Microsoft SQL server that handled our analysis services. When we were provisioning that 5 years ago, we knew that we always had peak times at our company. 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Monday mornings, everybody is in this reporting tool pulling all the data they need for their Monday morning meetings. And so we knew we were going to have to provision our server to handle that peak time, even if it's only 2 hours in a week. So we gave it 64 gigs of RAM. We gave it 8 cores. And, it worked. It handled those peak hours. And we paid a lot for it, as you can probably guess. The problem is that, yes, we paid a lot for it, but then we're not using that huge amount of processing power at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night when nobody is in the system. Frankly, that model is dead. Snowflake has this pay-as-you-go model that we like so much more. And they have a concept called warehouse. And a warehouse is essentially the engine that is going to be running your queries. And the warehouses can have different sizes. So let's say, for instance, I have a warehouse that is a medium size. Maybe it runs a query in 10 seconds. I can choose to bump that warehouse size up to a large. And now it's going to run that query in 5 seconds. And changing the size of your warehouses is something that happens instantaneously with no drop of performance. So now, what does this mean? Well, I have a script that runs at 9 a.m. on Monday mornings that says, bump my warehouse size up to a large because I know I'm going to have a ton of people in my system. 11 a.m. rolls around, I have a script that bumps my warehouse size back down to a medium. Now we are not paying as much as we used to because we are not using that huge size warehouse during the off-peak hours. In fact, at night, our warehouses turn off if no one is using them, and thus we are not paying for it. That's huge for us. You are no longer bottlenecked having to provision for those peak times. You pay only for what you use. In addition to that, there is a separation of compute and storage, so you don't have to pay for that in one combined number. It's going to be separated out, so if I can compute the storage you use, and as I mentioned, it's a pittance, like $23 a month per terabyte. And so we don't have to worry about that at all anymore. It barely even factored into our budget, so we love that. The final one, it services all of our users. And what do I mean by a user? Well, in Looker, we know who is logging in. So we can know, for instance, are they a SQL analyst? Are they a marketing operation team? Are they on the exec team? Or is it just a general Looker user? What is nice about Snowflake is that you can have multiple warehouses at any one time. So, for example, you can have a reporting versus an ETL warehouse. ETL, again, being the extract, transform, load. How do I get my data into Snowflake? And you know if there is ever going to be any huge query running in a report somewhere, you are not going to hinder your ETL process because you're using separate warehouses. Now, what does this have to do with users? Well, we can see the exec team is on here. And now you can actually have different warehouses partitioned to different users in Looker. So for instance, we actually separate out our reporting warehouses based on the user in Looker. So the executives get the large warehouse, whereas the rest of us peasants have to toil with the medium warehouse during the day. Because generally the executives, if they need to get in and use something, they need that answer quickly. So you can, again, not only partition based on like the time of the day when you have your peak times, but also based on the user that is using the services. Okay, so that was a general Snowflake overview, but let's go into what does all this mean for our marketing team? And this is where Looker comes in. So let's go back to those use cases that we talked about, the personalized experience, those thank you notes. Before we went with Looker, it was really difficult for a store to pull this information because they had to go up and manually look up the transaction and pull the customer information and pull the items on the transaction. But now you can see in the screenshot, usually in the screenshot, we will have customer information like name and address and phone number. We decided not to put it on the screenshot because we don't want you guys calling our customers. But you can see in the screenshot, we will show the store all of the transactions, for example, for the past week, ordered by what had the most dollar value. So they can know who do they have to write those thank you notes to. And in fact, that order number, you can actually click on it, and that's going to open up a new dashboard, and that's going to tell you, when it was purchased and what items were on the transaction. So you can call out, Mary Sue, thank you so much for buying the dress and the scarf on November 24th. Again, this is something that was very difficult to pull before, but now it is possible. The next use case, re-engaging at-risk customers. And what do I mean by at risk? Well, there's a concept in marketing called lapsing. I'm sure you know about it, where if a customer doesn't shop with a brand for over 12 months, they are considered lapsed and it is very difficult to re-engage them. So this is a look that we built that is going to automatically check for customers who have purchased between 10 and 12 months ago in the brand. So they're at risk of lapsing. And now the stores are able to pull that list of customers, and you can see on here we have call preference. So is the customer okay with having us call them? Well, at this point, the customer hasn't bought with us in 10 months. We don't have much to lose. Give them a call. Look up what they bought 10, 11, 12 months ago. Maybe it was a dress. Maybe you have a new dress and a new delivery that's selling really well. Maybe you need to tell them about it and get them back in the store. Again, something that was impossible to do before, but in Looker, it now just generates automatically. The next one, minimizing the manual labor. And this goes back to the marketing associate who used to have to pull 60 different lists, which took her, I think she told me 4 hours. I think it might have actually been longer than that. One really cool feature in Looker is something called a user access filter. So when we look at a customer record, we will assign them a primary store. So what we'll say is, okay, this customer shopped at this store most frequently, so that is their store. And the reason why we do that is because we don't want a single customer assigned to multiple store lists. So each customer has a primary store, and now our stores will be logging into Looker. And when they do, we have this user access filter that says, okay, we see that the Legacy Village store has logged in. We only want to show that store customers that have that primary store. What that means is that our poor dear marketing analyst can now generate one report in Looker that has all 60 stores on it and publish it out to stores. But when any individual store logs in and looks at it, it will only show their own store information. So now something that used to take all day now takes 5 minutes. So she loves that. And the final use case, linking on in-store and online. I mean, this is obviously a big one. You have your retail transactions living here. You have your e-commerce transactions living there. Now it's all going to be pulled in one single unified database. And I've talked about the personalized experience a lot. So a customer walks into a store. The store associate needs to know what they purchased online. They were never able to do that because that information is not fed back to their point of sale, which was before the only way that they could pull any of that information. Well, now it is all in there. So if they look up a customer, they can see every transaction they've ever had, no matter what channel it was. So they can know the customer walks into a store, maybe they purchased a dress online a week ago, and they want to return it. Well, they can know that instantly. In addition, as I mentioned, we are working on getting the web tag data. We are working on getting our social listening tool integrated into Snowflake so we can know if people are talking about us on Facebook or Twitter. We have talked about dreaming big. This is the dream, right? Getting everything in-store and online all combined into a single customer view. We're not there yet, but we know we have chosen the tools to be able to get there at some point with Snowflake and Looker. Closing thoughts, my last slide. So Snowflake and Looker have allowed Lilly easy access to all of its data in a single location. I think I've shown how important that is. You no longer have 8 different reporting tools used across the company. You no longer have data coming out of 4 different systems. Now it is in one place with one reporting tool. So everything agrees with everything else. Number 2, we can now define key corporate metrics and KPIs from a single unified source. Again, that average order value example. You need to define that consistently across your channels for a single brand. I mean, that's one of the key metrics that a retailer uses. And for years and years, the retail and e-commerce side never lined up, and we finally figured out why when we investigated. That's not happening anymore. Now people are all speaking the same language in terms of KPIs. Number 3, data is now centrally located, explaining the retirement of disparate legacy systems and reporting tools. This goes back to that cost, time, and money. We don't want to be spending time supporting the old systems. We don't want to be spending money supporting the old systems. Now that we have a single environment that can handle all of our use cases, we no longer have to. And finally, business users can now see total company metrics within Looker, whereas before this would come from multiple systems and stitched together in Excel. And I've talked about this one a lot. I don't like Excel. I don't like people stitching together data because inevitably it is just prone to user error. And it takes too much time. It's going back to that cost, the cost of time, the opportunity cost. Now people can pull everything they want directly out of Looker from one unified database in Snowflake. Okay, and that's my presentation. Thank you guys for listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Max. So I think it would be great to go through some questions. We've already had some come in from the audience. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Go ahead and click that, enter your question, hit enter. We'll be able to see that, and we're going to do our very best to get around to all of the questions that we have rolling in. We're lucky to have quite a few. So let's get started. Was the transition to Snowflake a long and expensive process?
The answer is no. Snowflake, it was actually quite easy to get up and running. Because again, all of the ETL tools that you're going to be looking at are generally going to have pre-built integrations into Snowflake. For us, it was actually, the difficulty was exposing the data from for example, our DB2. DB2 is a very archaic database. I mean, it's 30 years old. So it was never on the Snowflake side. It was actually, if you have those old databases, it might take some time to pull the data out. just because they're so old and tools might not necessarily integrate with it. But everything from the Snowflake side was really easy. And because Snowflake has a pay-as-you-go model, if, for example, we have issues with some ETL process, we can't get it working from the DB2 for like a month or something, we can just turn off the warehouse in Snowflake, and now we're not paying for anything. So for us, it actually was quite easy to get Snowflake up and running, and it wasn't expensive either.
Awesome. So there are a couple of related questions, and actually I'm really glad that you touched on ETL a little bit in that previous question. So I'm going to give you two, and I think maybe your response can cover both of these. The first one is, what happens when data needs to be updated? ETL scripts kick off again, question, or is Snowflake the single source of truth as you move forward? And then the second question is, what ETL tool are you using to manipulate the data once it's loaded into Snowflake, and what scheduling tool is used? So maybe just go into some more detail on your ETL process and whether or not Snowflake is your single source of the truth.
Yeah, I'll tackle the second one first. So the tool that I use, as we mentioned, is called Matillion. And generally what we are doing is we use it more as an ELT tool, so extract, load, transform. So we're going to get all the data into Snowflake exactly as it is from the source. And that way it's easier to tie back if you have any errors. Is it occurring in Snowflake or is it occurring in the source? You don't want your data changing between those 2 points generally. So in Matillion, for instance, you are able to connect to Snowflake, and what we do is generally we'll do our data modeling within Snowflake. So we'll build our view, for example, our view fact sales, which is going to have transactions from retail and e-commerce. And of course, those are going to be coming from different sources. So we build our view, we union all that together, and then we're going to be creating tables from that view to expose to Looker, because tables obviously have better performance than views. In Matillion, what we are doing is we're constantly running merges. So every hour, we know we have loaded more data, more retail transactions, more e-commerce transactions. So we will run a merge after that is done to merge that data from the view into the table. So I think that answers question number 2, but feel free to let me know if it didn't. The other question, what happens when data needs to be updated? ETL scripts kick off again, or is Snowflake the single source of truth as you move forward? So to be clear, Snowflake is the end point for all data, but it is not the starting point. So for instance, if I walk into a store and I enter a transaction, that is going to be going to our IBM DB2. It doesn't go directly to Snowflake. So I'm going to have an ETL process that kicks off once an hour to say, check for all new transactions over the past hour. We might have a last updated date time or a sequential integer. That's going to be our replication key. And then we are going to push that data into Snowflake. So Snowflake is the single source of truth as we move forward for reporting. But for the application service, for the website data, and for the retail data, that is still going to be living and being inserted into the application databases, your Oracle, your DB2, your SQL Server. Does that answer your question? I don't know if you can say yes or no.
No, but I think that pretty thoroughly covers what the question was looking to get at. So I'm assuming that's pretty good. Okay, so we have a couple of competitive related questions, and so we can definitely get into those. Here's one that's kind of interesting. Why would I use 2 products, Snowflake and Looker, when I could just use Domo?
Yeah, so this is a good one. And actually, when we were going through this project, we did a proof of concept with both Looker and Domo. And obviously, Looker won. And the major reason for that was because, yes, you can certainly use a tool like Domo, which is going to have your 3 layers of reporting all in one. And when I talk about my layers, what I mean is at the bottom, you have your ETL. So how do I get my data from my source into what is my second layer, the hosted database? And then finally, my 3rd layer on top was the reporting tool that services the end users. Domo does all 3. And of course, that does have a certain amount of simplicity to it, but it also implies vendor lock-in. And what do I mean by that? If you go through Domo, maybe you love their reporting tool, but you do not like their ETL process. Well, too bad. You are stuck with them. If you contract with Domo, you have to use them for all 3 layers. Would you not like doing vendor lock-in? Would you not like entering into long contracts? And what we found is that because we are using Snowflake as our database layer and Matillion as our ETL layer, and Looker as our reporting layer, if we have any problems with any one of them, we don't have to rip out the other two layers. And the example I'll use is that we have not been using Matillion as our ETL vendor for very long. We were actually using a different vendor when we first started the project, but we had some serious problems with them. They worked for us in the beginning, but they had some pretty bad limitations. So we actually did a cutover. We moved from that old vendor to Matillion. And if we were using one single tool that had all three of those, we would not have been able to do that. We like doing the best of breed across those three layers. So that is the reason why we went with the separated layers through three separate tools instead of the Domo model, which has all three tools in one.
Excellent. And on that same vein, we have some questions that are trying to get at the differences between Snowflake and other competitive products. So one of them is wondering what the difference is between Snowflake and Google BigQuery. Max, I'm sure you can talk to that, but I'm happy to speak to it as well. So I'm not sure if you want to go into that.
I can. So, and you might want to elaborate on whatever I say, but when we were originally going through the vendor selection process, we did also look at BigQuery, and they also have the pay-as-you-go model. In our experience, when we were going through the POC, we just had difficulty working with their support team and getting quick answers and working with their account reps. And I think it comes from being Google is a huge, huge company, and frankly, Lilly Pulitzer is not a huge, huge company. We are a mid-sized company. I don't think that they were necessarily assigning us the resources that we thought we deserved. Whereas when we went to Snowflake, they are certainly smaller than Google. They were much more personal. They responded to my questions. They helped us get through the process, and obviously the process with Snowflake was easy, whereas with Google, when we worked with it, it was a little bit more difficult. So that's the main reason why we went Snowflake over BigQuery.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense, and certainly glad to hear that. And from the kind of architectural standpoint, there are a couple of big differences between BigQuery and Snowflake. The first one being that BigQuery is a completely serverless product, which means it's kind of a black box when you're sending queries into BigQuery. If the query doesn't complete quickly enough, then there's really not too much that you can do to get around that. With Snowflake, though, you have really fine-grained control over not just how quickly an individual query is run, but also in the workload isolation and in the level of concurrency that you can serve across your organization. So you have a lot of flexibility in basically matching the capacity in your Snowflake database with whatever the need is in the organization. And so there's a simplicity factor there that's really important, and it also helps with being able to predict and understand what your costs are going to be over time, which of course is very important for every organization. Okay, so I'm taking a look at a couple of the other questions here. This is actually a really good one that I think would be interesting for you to answer. Where do you spend most of your time? Getting agreement on business decisions or definitions, ETL into Snowflake, or deploying metadata and reports in Looker?
Yeah, that is a good question.
Or other,
so or other. The BI team at Lilly Pulitzer is 2 people, and one of them is me. So, we do essentially everything ourselves. I would say that, at first we're going to be spending a lot of our time with ETL into Snowflake. So, when we were first building out the model, we knew we had to get data from our DB2 and data from our Oracle. But once we had that set up and flowing, and we do have that in Matillion, we don't really have to worry about it anymore unless we are building in new sources, which of course is part of the plan. Like for instance, we are going to be integrating Google Analytics. We're going to be integrating some of our third-party vendors like Falcon for social listening. So when those integrations come up, we will be spending our time in ETL. But I would say most of the time we are working in Looker, deploying the metadata and the reports, building out new functionality. Whether that functionality be built in Snowflake, we'll always be pushing it out in Looker. In terms of the getting agreement on business definitions, I let my boss handle that for the most part. He has the CEO's ear, and so he's been telling her to help us with that to make sure that we have the business definitions all consistent. Though I will say that when we were building out this project about 1.5 years ago, I went through to each specific department and came to them with a list of definitions and got all of those. And the goal is to make sure to understand why people define things certain ways, but then come to some consensus, usually by verdict of the CEO. I hope that answers your question.
That makes a lot of sense. You talked to this in your presentation a little bit, but I think it definitely, is something that is worth diving into. Prior to the Snowflake transition, did anyone report off of data in the source systems? And if so, does that still happen?
The answer is, of course, yes. People will kind of cling to their old reporting systems if they're used to it. So, something that we have been targeting is, I've talked about the 8 different reporting systems that we started with. Well, I think like 3 or 4 of them are still around. And it's because we haven't quite replaced all the functionality present in those old systems. So, for example, that SSAS cube is still in use today. The way to get people to move off of the old systems is to make the new system better. Make it so that they don't have a choice. They have to move to the new system because it has so much more enriched functionality that they're getting left behind. And that is the goal with Looker. We have been really building out a lot of new functions that make pulling data easier, less manual. But of course, you will always have people that are going to be going back to the source systems. Even though you make Looker better, they might cling to that forever. You eventually just have to turn those systems off, which is something we just did last week. We had replaced everything out of an old system. People still liked it, but we gave them about a 3-month heads up saying, like, we're going to turn off this old system, Diver, on this date. And you can do everything you could do in there in Looker plus more. And, the transition, it was not bad because I had met personally with every user and made sure we had replicated everything they used in Diver into Looker.
Okay, we have time for, I think, one more question. So in a similar thought to vendor lock-in, once you move your data into Snowflake, is it difficult to get out? Are there any issues with export or costs? And again, this is something I'm happy to talk to, but figured I'd let you take a crack at it first.
Yeah, feel free to embellish on anything I say, but the answer is no. Snowflake has a lot of easy tools to get data out and a lot of easy APIs to use. So, the Matillion system, for instance, makes all this really easy for us. You can very quickly just query a table and export that as a CSV into Amazon S3 and do anything you want from it at that point. Snowflake also offers something, a really cool new feature that we actually just started using called data share, meaning if you have multiple vendors all on Snowflake, you can very easily share instances of data without having to do any ETL at all. So our third-party CDP also uses Snowflake. They just turned on data share so that they are now exposing all of our customer data, all of our event data available to us without having to do any ETL. So we have never really had any issue getting data out of Snowflake because we also build customer feeds out to our third-party marketing tools, et cetera. So no, it's been really easy for us.
Well, that's certainly good to hear, and it kind of brings us to the end of the allotted time that we've had for this webinar. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. I'd like to send a big thanks to Max and Elena. I feel like this was definitely a great insight into everything that's happening at Lilly Pulitzer, and again, Max, we're just really appreciative of your time here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right, with that, we will close, and thank you everyone for attending today. We hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.